Some men forgive because time softens memory. Others forget because forgetting allows survival. Heathcliff did neither. Tonight's lecture has been reconstructed from recorded testimony, narrative accounts, and documented actions attributed to Heathcliff, a man who believed that memory, once sharpened, becomes a weapon. I am the archivist of Unquiet Voices. This is Ghost Lectures, Voices from Gothic Literature. Tonight's speaker requires reintroduction, because the Heathcliff preserved in Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights is frequently mischaracterized. He has been described as passionate, wild, Byronic, a figure of romantic obsession. But the historical pattern suggests something else. Heathcliff was not wild. He was disciplined. The surviving record describes the following. Heathcliff arrived at Wuthering Heights as a child, an orphan discovered in Liverpool and brought home by Mr. Earnshaw. He possessed no name, no known family, and no documented origin. He was given the name Heathcliff, a single word without surname. He was raised alongside the Earnshaw children, Hindley, who resented him, and Catherine, who formed an early attachment to him. After Mr. Earnshaw's death, Hindley inherited the estate and Heathcliff's status deteriorated. Contemporary accounts describe physical punishment, social degradation, and forced labor. Catherine later married Edgar Linton. Heathcliff disappeared. He returned 3 years later, financially independent, socially transformed, and strategically positioned. Over the following decades, he acquired property, manipulated inheritance structures, and secured legal control of both Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange. This pattern does not reflect instability. It reflects strategy. The lecture you are about to hear corresponds to the final period of Heathcliff's life, after his objectives were achieved but before his death. It presents a structured explanation of method rather than confession. No verified record exists of this lecture being delivered publicly. The reconstruction presented here is based on documented speech, recorded behavior, and witness testimony attributed to Heathcliff by primary observers. The purpose of preservation is analytical. Heathcliff represents not the terror of sudden violence, but the terror of sustained intention. He demonstrates what occurs when memory is preserved rather than resolved, when injury becomes method and revenge becomes architecture. Playback begins now.
I was brought to Wuthering Heights as a child. I do not remember the journey. I remember only waking in a house that was not mine, among people who had not asked for me, and being told that I now belong there. Belonging is a word that requires examination. Mr. Earnshaw, the man who brought me, treated me with a rough kindness. I was fed, I was clothed, I was given a name, though it was a dead boy's name. And I wore it like a hand-me-down coat. His daughter Catherine accepted me. His son Hindley did not. I learned quickly that acceptance is not a right. It is a condition, and conditions change. When Mr. Earnshaw died, Hindley inherited the estate. I was 13. Within a week, I was no longer treated as a member of the household. I was a servant. I slept in the stables. I was beaten when I spoke out of turn. I was given the work of a labourer and the status of a dog. Some would call this cruelty. I call it instruction, because what Hindley taught me, what he could not help but teach me, was the shape of power. Power is not abstract. It is not a feeling. It is a structure. It has mechanisms, inheritance, property, marriage, law, social standing. These are not decorations. They are the architecture of control. Hindley did not hate me because I had wronged him. He hated me because I had been elevated without earning it, and he could not tolerate the disorder. So when he gained the power to restore order, he did. He put me in my place. I studied that. I did not weep, I did not rage, at least not in any way that mattered. I watched. I observed how power moved, how it was inherited, how it was enforced, how it could be taken. Injury, you see, is the finest education a man can receive if he is willing to learn from it. Most men are not. Most men suffer injury and then spend their lives trying to forget it. They call this healing. They call it moving forward. They call it strength. I call it surrender. I was not interested in forgetting. I was interested in understanding. Why had I been degraded? Not because I deserved it, not because I was incapable, but because I lacked the mechanisms of power. I had no family name, no inheritance, no legal standing. I was outside the structure, and the structure crushed me. Very well. Then I would learn the structure. I would enter it, and I would use it. This is the first principle of revenge. Injury teaches the shape of power. If you are humiliated, do not waste time asking why you deserved it. You did not. But you were vulnerable. Study that vulnerability. Learn what protected your enemy and what exposed you. Then acquire what they have. I was a child when I learned this. But I learned it completely, and I never forgot. After Catherine married Edgar Linton, I left Wuthering Heights. I will not describe what I felt. Feeling is not the subject of this lecture. I will say only this. I left because I had nothing. No property. No education. No standing. I was a degraded servant in love with a woman who had chosen a gentleman. If I had stayed, I would have remained powerless. And powerlessness is unacceptable. So I disappeared. For 3 years, no one at Wuthering Heights or Thrushcross Grange knew where I was. I did not write. I did not send word. I simply vanished. When I returned, I was a different man. I had money, enough to live as a gentleman. I had education, enough to speak as one. I had learned how to move through the world that had once excluded me. I was no longer the boy who slept in the stables, but I had not healed. This is the second principle of revenge. Time strengthens revenge when memory remains intact. Most men believe that time weakens anger. They say, "Witty, give it time. You'll feel better. The wound will close." They are wrong. Time does not weaken revenge. Time prepares it. Revenge requires waiting, not because you are weak, but because you are building. You are acquiring the tools you will need. You are positioning yourself. You are learning patience, which is not the same as forgiveness. Patience is the willingness to delay satisfaction in order to ensure its completeness. While I was gone, I did not forget what had been done to me. I did not move on. I did not tell myself that Catherine's marriage was for the best, or that Hindley's cruelty was understandable, or that I should let go. I remembered. Every day I remembered, and I used that memory as a foundation. When you are injured, the world tells you to forget, to forgive, to release the past. It tells you this because your memory is dangerous. Your memory is a threat to the people who harmed you. If you forget, they are safe. If you forgive, they are free. But if you remember, if you hold the injury in your mind with perfect clarity, then you remain dangerous. And danger properly cultivated becomes power. I returned to Wuthering Heights not as a victim, but as an architect. I did not come back to beg. I did not come back to plead. I came back to begin, and I had all the time in the world. Because I had waited, let me address a common misunderstanding. People believe that revenge is an act of passion. They imagine it as a sudden violence, a strike, a confrontation, a moment of release. They think of revenge as rage made visible. This is a fantasy. Rage is useful. I do not deny that. Rage clarifies. It shows you what you want. It shows you who your enemies are. It burns away doubt. But rage by itself is useless because rage is brief. Rage is a fire. It burns hot. It consumes everything in its path. And then it dies. If you act on rage alone, you will strike once, perhaps twice, and then you will be spent. You will have exhausted yourself, and your enemy, if they survive, will recover. They will rebuild. They will protect themselves, and you will have nothing left. This is why most revenge fails. Men strike in anger. They wound their enemy. They feel satisfaction for a moment, and then they realize the wound was not deep enough. The enemy is still standing. The structure that enabled the original injury is still intact, and now the enemy is prepared. Revenge, to succeed, must be disciplined. It must be planned, it must be sustained, it must be structural. You do not strike once. You do not wound. You dismantle. This is the third principle. Revenge fails when it is emotional. It succeeds when it is procedural. Let me be clear. I am not saying you should feel nothing. I felt everything. I felt rage. I felt grief. I felt hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. But I did not act on those feelings. I used them. Rage told me what I wanted. Discipline told me how to get it. I did not storm into Wuthering Heights and strike Hindley down. I could have. He was a drunk. He was weak. It would have been easy. But what would that have accomplished? He would be dead. I would be hanged, and his son Hareton would inherit the estate. No. Instead, I waited. I lent Hindley money when he was desperate. I played cards with him when he was drunk. I let him sink deeper into debt that he owed to me. And when he died, I owned Wuthering Heights. Not through violence, through law. I did not kill Edgar Linton either. I married his sister. I made sure she was miserable. I made sure she understood that her marriage to me was a trap. And when she died, I ensured that her son, Edgar's heir, was under my control. I did not need to kill Edgar. I simply had to outlast him. And I did. This is what discipline allows. It allows you to think in years, not moments. It allows you to build a structure of revenge so complete that your enemies cannot escape it. They are not struck down, they are enclosed. Rage would have given me one death. Discipline gave me 2 estates, 2 generations, and the satisfaction of watching my enemies realize slowly, helplessly, that they had lost everything. Rage is a tool, discipline is the hand that wields it. I want to talk about family. Family is often spoken of as a source of love, of loyalty, of continuity. People say, blood is thicker than water. They say, Family is everything. They are correct, but not in the way they think. Family is not a refuge. Family is a mechanism. It is a system for transferring power across time. Property passes through family. Names pass through family. Status passes through family. If you want to destroy someone, you do not simply harm them. You harm their family. You ensure that their children inherit nothing. You ensure that their name dies. This is the fourth principle. Revenge becomes most powerful when embedded in structure. I did not simply take Wuthering Heights from Hindley. I took it from his son. Hareton Earnshaw, Hindley's boy, should have inherited the estate. He was the rightful heir, but I made sure he inherited nothing. I raised him as Hindley raised me. I degraded him. I kept him illiterate. I turned him into a labourer on his own land. And he did not even know it had been stolen. That is structural revenge. I did not need to explain to Hareton what I had done. I did not need him to understand. I simply needed him to live the life that should have been mine, and to believe it was his natural place. I did the same to Edgar Linton's family. I married his sister Isabella. I made her life a misery. When she fled, I kept her son, my son Linton, weak, sickly, pathetic. I raised him to be a tool, and then I married him to Catherine's daughter, young Cathy, Edgar's only child. Do you see? Young Cathy was Edgar's heir. She should have inherited Thrushcross Grange, but I married her to my son, and when my son died, conveniently, shortly after the marriage, I inherited everything. Thrushcross Grange became mine. Not through violence, through marriage law. I did not kill Edgar. I did not kill young Cathy. I simply ensured that the mechanisms of inheritance worked in my favour. I turned family into a weapon. This is what most people fail to understand about revenge. They think it is personal. They think it is about hurting the person who hurt you. But that is small. True revenge is generational. You do not simply harm your enemy. You ensure that their children have nothing. You ensure that their legacy is erased. You take not just their property, but their future. By the time I was finished, I owned both estates, Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange, the two great houses of the moors, and the children of my enemies, Hareton and young Cathy, lived under my roof, under my control, with nothing of their own. I did not need to kill anyone. I simply needed to outlast them. And I did. I want to end with a question. Why did I not forgive? People ask this. They ask it of me. They ask it of themselves. They say, why hold on to the past? Why not let go? Why not heal? They say, forgiveness is strength. Forgiveness is freedom. I say, forgiveness is surrender. To forgive is to say, what was done to me does not matter. I release you from the consequences. I will carry the injury alone, and you will walk free. Why would I do that? I was brought to Wuthering Heights as a child. I was given a dead boy's name. I was raised as a son. And then I was cast out. I was beaten. I was degraded. I was turned into a servant in the house that had once been my home. Catherine, the girl I loved, married a man with property and standing. She chose him because I had neither. And I was expected to accept this. I was expected to move on, to forget, to forgive. I refused. This is the fifth principle, the final principle. Mercy belongs to those who forget. I did not forget. Memory is a choice. The world tells you to let go of the past. It tells you that holding on to injury is a burden, that it will poison you, that it will consume you. Perhaps. But forgetting is also a poison. If I had forgotten, I would have remained powerless. I would have lived my life as a degraded servant, telling myself that it didn't matter, that I had moved on, that I was free. But I would not have been free. I would have been defeated. Memory is a weapon, but only if you refuse to let it fade. I remembered every injury, every humiliation, every moment of powerlessness, and I used those memories as a map. I did not forgive Hindley, I took his estate. I did not forgive Edgar, I took his. I did not forgive Catherine. I made sure that her daughter lived under my control. Some will say I destroyed myself in the process, that I spent my life consumed by hatred, that I died alone, haunted, empty. Perhaps. But I also died victorious. I want to be clear about something. I am not telling you that revenge will make you happy. It will not. I am not telling you that revenge will heal you. It will not. I am telling you that revenge, properly executed, will give you power. And power is the only thing that matters. Happiness is for those who forget. Justice is for those who believe in fairness. Revenge is for those who remember. I remembered, and I won. That is all.
The recording ends here. What follows is a contextual note drawn from the surviving record. Heathcliff died in April of 1802. He was found in his room at Wuthering Heights, lying in the bed near the window that faced the moors, and beyond them, the churchyard where Catherine Earnshaw was buried. The servant said his eyes were open, that he seemed to be looking at something, that there was a strange expression on his face, not peace, but something like satisfaction. He was 40 years old. By the time of his death, he had achieved everything he set out to do. He owned both estates, he had degraded the children of his enemies, he had dismantled 2 families and rebuilt them in his image. And yet, in his final days, he stopped eating. He stopped sleeping. He wandered the moors at night. He spoke to someone who wasn't there. He was, by all accounts, haunted. But haunted by what? Regret? Guilt? Or by the realization that revenge, once complete, leaves nothing behind? The ideas in tonight's lecture did not survive Heathcliff in any formal sense. He left no writings, no students, no followers. But his philosophy, his method, has survived in other ways. Because Heathcliff represents something we recognize even if we don't want to admit it. He represents the refusal to forgive, the refusal to forget, the belief that injury must be answered not with healing but with structure. We see this in legal systems, in political movements, in personal vendettas that span decades. We see it in people who say, "I will never forget what you did to me." And we see it in the quiet, patient dismantling of enemies, not through violence, but through law, through inheritance, through time. Heathcliff's revenge was not passionate. It was procedural. And that, perhaps, is what makes it so unsettling. Because passion can be understood. Passion can be forgiven. But discipline? Discipline is cold. Discipline is patient. Discipline does not burn out. Discipline endures. After Heathcliff's death, the two estates, Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange, passed to the next generation. Hareton Earnshaw and young Catherine Lytton, the children of his enemies, were finally free. They married. They rebuilt. They tried to create something new. But they did so on land that Heathcliff had owned, and houses that he had controlled, with names that he had shaped. His revenge was complete, but its consequences lived on. The lecture you have just heard was reconstructed from recorded testimony, narrative accounts, and documented actions attributed to Heathcliff. We cannot know if he would have said these things exactly, but we know he believed them because he lived them. The moors are still there. Wuthering Heights still stands, at least in memory. And somewhere in the wind and the stone, Heathcliff's voice remains, not asking for forgiveness, not seeking understanding, simply explaining, this was how it was done. Ghost Lectures Voices from Gothic Literature is written and narrated by Danielle Christmas and produced by Audio Ellis. If you enjoyed this lecture, consider subscribing and sharing the recording with another lover of Gothic literature. Additional lectures will be released as new materials are recovered.